We're here today with Ken Griggs, the founder of Julia.Social. Julia.Social has recently told the world about the first product, which is not.bot. More broadly, Julia is a privacy protecting identity company. So Julia is providing a broad set of products and has a big vision for what it's going to eventually do. Let's start by talking about the first products that have been launched. So this is not.bot. It allows you to onboard into the ecosystem using a passport, and then it allows you to start creating not.bot stickers. And these stickers can be used by, well, maybe we should start there, Ken. So tell us a little bit about Julia and tell me if I got any of that wrong to start us out.
Very good. Well, first off, thank you so much, Grant, for having me here today. I'm happy to be on the show again, and happy to talk to the both of you again. So first off, yes, I think yeah, you got it correct. The name of the company is Julia.Social. Sort of the basis of the name Julia was from the book 1984. And she was successfully able to maintain her personal agency in a surveillance world by protecting her privacy. So in my book, that makes her the hero of the, in my opinion, that makes her the hero of the book. And then Julia.Social is all about helping people maintain social relationships on an internet that is increasingly full of bots and AI. The first product, like you said, is not.bot. It's literally just an easy way to prove that you are not a bot. Again, it's all about protecting privacy.
So this
Yep.
works, that the reason that not.bot works, it right now presumes that there is a way to demonstrate that you're not a bot. And passports are issued to humans, which is exhaustively checked by the governments who do this. They're clearly not issuing passports to bots. And if that's occurring, it's a government problem that they would need to solve. So since a human has a passport, demonstration of the passport is a stand-in for that proof of personhood.
Absolutely. And that's where we start. So that is an easy way that people can prove they're not a bot on day one. So it's what we would like to get to down the road is in-person ways to do that. So we're not, the best way to prove you're not a bot is to stand in front of another human and prove you're not a bot. For now, the quickest thing that we can do, and that is still very effective, is scanning passports. Passports, people typically guard their passports very well. You don't find people loaning their passports to people and letting them do whatever they may want to with them. That's just not a thing that people do. So it's a really good way to anchor to a specific human, and it maintains a cryptographic chain, right? So the data in your passport is cryptographically signed by your government for the ones that have NFC chips. And so we have that chain of cryptographic signatures all the way through to your not.bot then.
Okay, so we onboarded into Julia. Passport is the first thing. There's something coming down the road, which is some sort of an in-person verification. So maybe we've got centers getting set up, and maybe it looks something like an identity booth. You walk into the identity booth, there's somebody who helps you check it. Looks a lot like what TSA pre-check or other types of identity services look like. There are these centers all over the place. So maybe they integrate with Julia or something like that. But for right now, we have a way that people can onboard into it. And they have a mechanism for demonstrating that they're not a bot. So, but this is not just presenting all of the data that's on the passport. We're actually doing something slightly different here. Is all of the data does what? Kind of walk us through a little bit of what is happening to the user's data and what is generated when you create a not.bot.
I'm happy to do that. So how does that process work? You scan the chip in the back of your passport. We use a company called Inverid. It's a Dutch company. They work with a lot of governments worldwide. They're very much privacy protecting, as being a European company, and in particular, if you go look up anything about the Dutch, you'll discover they're big into that, just as a society. That data never stays on their server for more than 5 minutes, and is frequently much less. That data then comes briefly to a Julia server, where it is immediately, we construct half of a multi-party computation proof of that data, and then immediately discard the data. Okay, the phone constructs the other half. So the important thing here, it's an easy way, for the more technically inclined, an easy thing to do would just be to store the hash. But that's not what we're doing, right? The hash of the name Ken, is pretty easy to find out what the hash of the name Ken is, and to find all the Kens in your data set, right? So we're doing something much more sophisticated to make sure that even a brute force attack on the data that Julia holds cannot reveal the data. So now at this point, the data, of course, is on your phone. The data is not at Julia. The data is not at Inverid, and there is nothing that can be done with the data that Julia retains to recover it or to identify any of the people involved. It is only when the phone and Julia's servers interact through a process called multi-party computation that a valid credential that can be read by a third party can be produced.
So a credential that can be read by a third party. So I think that that's the next part that I want to laser in on.
Mm-hmm.
When you're doing a not bot, what are they
Mm-hmm.
reading? You're not presenting any type of identity chunks. You're not saying anything about yourself except for that you're a human. So
Yep.
what does it mean to do that? Like, what are they checking, and how do they go about checking it?
So the not.bot credential itself is just a credential with no other information that is created at the time that you enroll with your passport. That there is no other information associated with that not.bot credential. It is signed by Julia. It is provided to the app. At that point, Julia.Social, the company, never knows what you do with it. If you choose to package it into a sticker and share it with someone, or eventually if you choose to use it to when you're accessing a website or any of the other things that we have planned down the road, um, Julia.Social never knows that happens. So it's, again, we're really focused on privacy. We're focused on anti-censorship. We're focused on not tracking. We don't know what you do with it. We just provide you that thing. We know that it's true because
You've cut something. So this is like you've created a very particular type of credential, and it's essentially just something that is assumed to be correct because a passport is not something that a robot can have. So it is
right.
from Julia as an issuer is saying, you've demonstrated to us through this passport process that you did this dance with using Inverid. They
Yep.
validated the passport since it was a valid passport and all the
Mhm.
data is correct. And we have a chain of trust for all of that stuff. You
Yep.
get a free credential. And that one says, we've checked you, you're human. So that's what the not.bot is. It's this piece of credential that's been given to you by Julia as the issuer. And then other people can look at that and say, yep, that thing that you have has been correctly demonstrated to us in some fashion.
That's fantastic, and you bring up a good point that we didn't really just mention what a credential is. A credential is a statement by an issuer, right, about a subject, that has that has some, property and value is the proper term, but it is a statement about that person. The issuer in this case is Julia. So Julia has an identity, just like people have an identity. So Julia is the one making the statement. The person has an identity, and they are the person about whom the statement is being made. And then the statement in question is not a bot. It's literally not bot. And that is the key thing that we're doing. Then the important thing, the next step, which is important, is that people then have aliases. And so we're able to construct, as you create aliases, we're able to reconstruct new not bots for each of those aliases. And the important thing about those aliases is that Julia.Social, the company, again, is not tracking you. We don't even know what aliases you have. So that data is
And
literally
the
not stored.
use case for aliases, what you're trying to do with these as you generate more of them, the
Mm,
reason you would want to generate many aliases
mm,
is so that you can not just keep reusing it when you encounter other humans on the internet. Is that kind of
mhm,
the gist of it? Is I can show you that there is a Ken and he's not, or sorry, that there's this guy that's not a bot, and then
mm,
there's this another guy that's not a bot.
mhm.
That doesn't necessarily differentiate those, but it does allow me to just say, hey, I am a human and I am definitely not bot.
Right. Right. So the reason we use aliases is that there's basically sort of two use cases. You might have, you know, your persona, your public persona as Grant, right? It's that persona exists on YouTube, that persona exists on X, that persona exists, I'm sure, in many other places as well. And that is and that identity is what you have presented. That is all the content you've recorded here. That is the post that you have made, and that is sort of how people know you as that
Well,
identity.
well, but
Right?
I mean, those identities that I have, they are identities in those spaces. There are those identities within those gardens.
Right.
I mean, sometimes I tell people on multiple different places, "Hey, I am the same person all over the place," but in a lot of cases, I don't want to do that. So is that the use case for aliases? I would go
Exactly.
generate an alias and then I would use it on YouTube and then I would generate an alias and I would go use it on Twitter and it's my responsibility to sort of keep those separate and make sure that I use the right one in the right place.
Yes, which is why we give you the ability to name an alias, to remind you, to give you a personal private nickname for an alias so that you can keep track of where you want to put it. We can build more tooling later to make it easier to make sure to always use the certain ones in the right place. But that gives you the ability to have one alias that you use in many places, and other aliases that you use only on one site, and maybe a third set of aliases that you only ever use once. And this is, this is something I want to do. This is a interaction that I want to make sure is never connected to anything else. You use it just once, and then that alias is gone forever as far as you're concerned.
But
Yeah.
from the site's perspective on all of this stuff, these alias things that are being used, there's no interaction with the site particularly. So this is not where the site is getting something out of this utility. It's like the site has some ability for user-based content to be generated, and
Mhm.
the user is marking it up in a special way to demonstrate to people that are there something about the content, and
Mhm.
that there's a human, that there is some human somewhere backing something, but
Yep.
it's hard for us to differentiate what that is unless we couple it with another piece of technology that you built, which is the names and the creator badges.
Mhm.
I
Exactly.
mean,
So
these are kind of presupposed that you need all of that stuff before it, because otherwise, alias, it just seems like you just turn the crank on it. You have lots of them. Like it seems like you could be making them for other people, and then that might not be desirable for a lot of different reasons.
certainly. Exactly. The the sort of the reason, one of the important things is that we we keep the keys for those identities in the secure element of your device, in part so that those keys don't get out and get spread around to everybody, so that everybody's using your identity or using different aliases on your identity. The Yeah, that identity is pretty well locked down to your phone. The um
Well,
and
since you brought it up, let's talk about that for a second. So the
Sure.
secure element, it's a very particular piece of hardware that is embedded in newer iPhones. So
Mhm.
if you have a really old iPhone, you won't have one of these. So it's a chip that exists inside the device, and it's got all kinds of protections on it. If you try to remove it, I think it does something weird. It's really hard to even get at that chip if it's in any way has been compromised off the board. So there's a whole bunch of physical constraints on the device. And essentially what it
Yep.
allows you to do is create a key pair. So it will say, all right, we're going to create a public private key pair. We're going to give you the public chunk. You can have that all you want. The private key, we're never going to give it to you. We'll let you do two operations with it. You can sign something, or you can encrypt or decrypt something. And that's it. That's pretty much all the secure element gives you access to. So what exactly is Julia putting in there? I mean, it's got to be keys. What do those keys do?
Okay, well, so the secure element, of course, as you say, is a way to create keys, and those keys are used to protect your identity. Like if you can't get those keys out, and you can't, then you're not going to be able to use that identity. Is that because your description of the secure element was, I thought, very good, and yes, that's exactly how we're using it.
Right. So you generate a key pair. Are you
Mhm.
encrypting or decrypting something? What are you signing? Just like you mentioned it. So I know that it's been, at least when I'm looking at people checking out what's going on with Julia and notbot, there's
Mhm.
confusion about, well, are the verifiable credentials in the secure element? Is my passport data in the secure element? The answer to all of those is no. The only thing
Right.
you can put in secure element is private keys. So if
Right.
private keys are what's in there, okay, well, what is Julia using those private keys for? It's to create the not bots, to create the aliases. What is the mutable operation that's happening? Or like, why do you need a private key at all in this whole scenario?
So one of the key things you need a private key for, of course, is to sign the messages that you put. For now, in stickers, but then later on, when you're interacting with third parties more directly, there the ability to sign those messages with a real key is I think fundamental to being able to have an identity that only you can assert, and it can't easily be transferred to someone else. The other thing we're doing with it is that the data stored on your phone is stored in an encrypted data store, and the key in the secure element is used to encrypt that data store. So if your phone gets stolen, gets disassembled, and someone goes and pulls out the equivalent of an SSD that's in there, they're not going to be able to read the data for your credentials, or for the stickers that you've created, or the stickers that you've scanned, or any of that data is illegible.
Okay, so there's the secure enclave cryptographic element. It's
Mhm.
got private keys in there.
Yep.
We're using those keys to sign certain types of data and to demonstrate ownership over the stuff that has been generated through this multi-party compute. So I have the data and it's encrypted on my phone and I've got the secure element. And so all of this data is being managed within the app itself to
Mhm.
generate the types of assertions that you want to make on the internet. I'm
Right.
not a bot. And then you can
Mhm.
layer that in with the other types of data that have been extracted from the passport and have been forged into credentials which can be attached to the notbot. So this allows you to make an assertion about anything that has been extracted by the from the passport. And this is, if we look in the screen, there's all those different things that you could potentially put a check mark by and say, I want to say this, in
Yep.
addition to my demonstration that I am not a bot.
Yes, exactly. And one of the things you'll notice is that we have a little warning saying, "Hey, we recommend you don't actually share any of this information." So, and we actually put a couple of checks and balances checks in there. When you first have to decide for an alias which pieces of information I'm going to make available to myself to share with respect to that alias, and
That's
then
kind of like
later.
putting a little set of guardrails around yourself, like saying, well, I want to make sure that I don't errantly share too much with this one alias. So I want to make sure that just these three things are available to me on this alias so I don't screw it up.
Exactly right. So, if I want to make sure I never share my name on this particular alias, I leave that unchecked. Maybe I'm only going to use this alias to show that I'm over 18, for example. Well, I'll leave everything else unchecked except for age over, and then I can all the rest of it will never get shared. The thing you have to remember is that once a piece of information is out there, right, you can't control where it goes. So if you share your name on an alias in one place, right, and then you share your age on an alias, on the same alias in another place, someone might get a hold of both of those presentations or both of those stickers in the current implementation and say, oh, well, now I know that the person with this name is also, over 18 or whatever, or has this age. That's, now they're able to sort of build a more complete picture of you than maybe you had wanted, which is why we start at the beginning and we say, hey, you have to decide up front what information you choose to share with this alias, and then all the stickers you create and other ways you're able to use your identity in the future, those can only ever include the information that you pre-selected.
Lucas, what's coming to your mind at this point? I know that Ken and I have been kind of going back and forth, and I'm imagining that you're thinking hard about everything that's been said. Is any of what has been talked about thus far not entirely clear, or like what are you thinking?
So when you guys are talking about both aliases and selecting specific information that that you reveal about yourself, I'm sort of wandering through a James Bond novel in my head, because I'm assuming that what goes on broadly, or what is a problem if you're trying to conceal your identity, is the triangulation of information.
Mm.
And so, Ken, is that broadly what you're trying to prevent here with these functions? When you say Julia is a privacy protecting app, I would say that's probably the reason that you're headed in that direction. Am I correct there?
Absolutely. So the fundamental thing that Julia is about doing is protecting your privacy, and and giving you the tools to make that easy to do, where those tools don't really exist right now. There's lots of once you have a notion of identity, you have to have a notion of identity in order to have a notion of privacy, and then what can you do with that once you have it? That's what we're working on building out now and for the foreseeable future with Julia and not.bot.
Okay, well, I'm not wrong there. What do you think? What kind of an effect is this going to have on the economy of the web? If people's information is no longer for sale, are they going to be able to pierce that, or is that part of your plan with Julia in the long run?
The economy of the web. Well, the economy of the web right now is, we have companies exiting markets. As Grant pointed out recently, Blue Sky has exited a state, and I'm sorry, I don't recall which at the moment. But because they felt they could not comply with the regulations in place for ensuring that they're not serving children, or the children.
Mississippi is the state, yeah. But
Perfect.
it's a story that gets repeated all over the place, is that we're seeing this jurisdictional exit from markets of various different companies.
Right, and that, the economic impact is that, people are, large swaths of people are being restricted out of services that they're used to being able to have. And that, or alternatively, a huge amount of additional information is being gathered by a huge number of additional of companies that didn't have to gather it before, and both of which are bad. So the providing a privacy protecting way to comply with those requirements, and with the is a very valuable thing as we move forward.
I mean, when I think about the state of Mississippi passing requirements that are unfeasible for Blue Sky to meet now, and part of me says, well, that's actually very valid. There has been sort of a free for all of information that has been at the fingertips of more people than we want to admit. But I also think about, say, going to Amazon and being shown different prices for the items that I'm shopping for as to somebody else. And that goes back to, I have very little control of. You're absolutely right when you say, when a piece of your identity gets out there, it's out there and it is used against us. So as you begin to describe some of this personal custody of information and also the use of aliases, I think that you begin to put a lot of power back into the hands of people who are using the internet, not just those people who are amassing troves of data to use against everyone.
Let's talk about this from the site's perspective for a minute. So help me to understand because right now we're talking purely about peer-to-peer presentations. And when we're talking about these peer-to-peer presentations, you can know some amount of stuff about the user because they're maybe saying that their first name is something, or that they're over 18, and you can trust that. But when it comes to the site, now, how do you view a site interacting with somebody that has not-bot technology? This probably wouldn't be using aliases at that point, right? Or would they?
So yes, I mean, people want to be able to have alt accounts. One of the things that comes into play, which actually was probably the lion's share of the work that we did in multi-party compute. Obviously, we did lots of things with multi-party computation. It's an absolutely magical technology that we were able to use. But the thank you, yeah, for the screen there. The lion's share of that work was around how do you work with a site to be able to demonstrate that you're a unique human, right? And so now we need to be able to
Wait, does
have
an alias do that? Can you use an alias to demonstrate that you're a unique human?
no, because anybody can create as many aliases as they like. If I can just show up to a website with 37 aliases and that website has no way to tell that all those aliases are the same person, that would be a challenge for the website. But similarly, if somehow the website would only ever let me use one alias, and then now I have the potential to be tracked. It's like, oh, if websites that need civil protection is the proper term there. Websites that need civil protection all require that I use some special alias. Well, now I have that special alias everywhere, and everybody's and I can be tracked again. What we actually do differently, and this is down the road, but hopefully this calendar year, is the ability to create what's called a pairwise identifier. And so this is created only with your consent, so you can decline. But when you create that pairwise identifier, the website, when you consent to using multi-party computation to create that pairwise identifier, the website then can tell that you are a unique human, regardless of what alias you may choose to use. So you may still have your 37 alt accounts, but then at that point, the website can tell that those 37 alt accounts belong to one human without knowing anything else about that human. So that has a lot of value.
Go back for a second. You gotta help me understand this process, because like you said, the alias itself doesn't tell the site that there's a unique human. So you're in the app, you're creating aliases, and for those who have had a chance to experience it, you know that you can create multiple. So inside of the not.bot app, after I've done my onboarding, I can say create alias, and I can do it again, and I can say create alias, and I can do it again, and I can say create alias. And if I were to walk those to somebody who can look at the data, they wouldn't be able to say that one individual human created those 5 aliases. That's
That's right.
not in the data. But
It's not
if they
possible.
do something else, then you would be able to tell that those 5. So help me understand that part, because I got a little lost. I wasn't sure I followed that 100%.
Okay. Let's imagine the case where you want to go to one site, and that site requests to be able to identify you as a unique human. You can choose to decline. If you consent, then we're going to go do a little multi-party computation dance, right? That is strictly between you and that site, right? Julia doesn't know anything at all about who the site is, anything. Truly can't tell. Doesn't know anything at all about where you're doing that. And now at that point, you get a token, an identifier. And when you go back to that site, they'll say, "Hey, give me you agreed to create this thing. Give me your pairwise identifier." When you provide it, they say, "Oh, okay. Now I know that you're this human." You can still use multiple aliases.
That's not computed off of an alias, though, right? It's computed off of your root did, or your singleton, or like that. That's like, because you don't make a pairwise identity with a site with one of your aliases. You do it with
That's right.
the main thing.
That's right. Exactly.
And that's what keeps it civil protected, is you can only use that one thing. What is, I mean,
That's
is
right.
it, what happens if somebody tries to slip them a Mickey? What if they try and throw that alias as the base thing that they use to compute it? It just says, well, that's not the right type. It's a not a root did, or I guess whatever.
Well, so going back to multi-party computation, both of the participants in our case, all 3 really, of the participants in a multi-party computation are aware of the computation that's happening, so they know it's the correct computation, or the one that they're expecting. But they don't know what the other party's inputs were to create whatever the output is. And so that's the website knows for sure that this thing is being created correctly, because it can look at the process that's being done, but it cannot. But it doesn't have any way to know anything about the party on the other side. But yes, you're right.
Okay.
The alias is not involved in that process.
Gotcha. So it's almost like we've got 2 different kinds of things that we're able to use in the world of Julia and the world of not.bot. Is we have these aliases, they
Mhm.
have some utility. Then as sites say, I want to be able to do certain types of things. I want to have unique users. I want to know that I'm dealing with unique humans. They have a different piece of technology that you're providing, and that's the pairwise identity. So it uses a lot of the same tech. It uses multi-party compute, uses the thing that you first created when you did your onboarding, which is that root did. And so now the site has some additional guarantee that you're not going to come in here multiple different times and try to get some whatever that they're trying to give you. Like a lot of times sites are trying to give something away. Maybe it's an account, maybe it is a free hamburger at McDonald's, whatever. Right now, those things are significantly difficult to do. And a lot of sites get ripped off by people that figure out how to game the system. So this actually is a way for sites to know that they're not having something like that done to them, for anybody that can come through the not.bot door.
That's right. Yeah, and the airdrops are a big one. I just saw Michael Taylor was out saying that he was gonna offer an airdrop, but the bots found him, and suddenly he was getting a bunch of garbage requests to participate in his airdrop. That has always been a problem with airdrops, is that everybody tries to game them to be able to get more than their share of the airdrop. And it's and this will absolutely prevent that. But one of the things I don't know if I had adequately mentioned here, again, we're protecting privacy. Once you have that pairwise identifier, it is only between you and that site. If you a different site, that identifier is utterly meaningless and completely opaque. There is nothing that any other site can, first off, you would never give it to them. You would never share it with them. But even if you did, there is no information carried there. So it's basically, if not.bot is proof of human, then a pairwise identifier is proof of unique human.
So if a site that's established a pairwise identifier has all of their pairwise identity listed in a database, those get compromised. They're out in the world. It's not; those are not traceable back to the identities because how are those not traceable back to the DIDs?
So you still use an alias when you talk to them. So like I said, you could have 37 different aliases you're using for different alt accounts on that site. That's fine. The only thing that that does though is like, okay, well now I know that when I use these two aliases, those are the same unique human. So if they got,
I think the question was slightly different though. So let me try to rephrase it because I think we're going slightly off. Lucas is saying, let's say that a site's integrated and it's got lots and lots of users generating these pairwise DIDs. And at some point they get compromised and it says, well, let's say that they even did something that maybe isn't the best idea. They just took that pairwise identifier and just straight up used it as a key in the database. So it says, here's pairwise identifier, and then here's internal name. So let's say that X integrated and did it, and then X would say about me, there's Granto-san, that's my X handle, and then it has a pairwise identifier associated with it. But the pairwise identifier for X is not the same as any other pairwise identifier for any other site, and you wouldn't use that pairwise identifier anywhere except on X. So for all intents and purposes, it's an internal GUID. It's an internal, generally unique identifier that is just specific to that one site and doesn't do anything else. So if Twitter or X gets its database compromised, there's some other very opaque token that's sitting there that doesn't do anyone any good. It doesn't allow them to track, compromise yourself in any other way that's any more different than anything else. It's just this thing that's between these two parties, and it doesn't have any general utility to open up a broader identification of your person.
Right. That is exactly correct. It does. It's completely opaque.
Does that help, Lucas? I think that was the question you were asking, wasn't it?
That was the question, and great news because I'm don't fall over and gasp. You security-minded people, but I use the same password for a lot of sites. I don't join sites, very many sites, because this current setup is. I get tired of being alerted that Yahoo or Target or some other site got hacked, and I have to go change all my passwords. So I'm glad to hear it, Ken. That was my concern.
Awesome. One of the things I'm looking forward to is when we get to the point where you can log in with not.bot and you can spin up an alias on your own, and you don't have to have 37,000 accounts everywhere. You have your identity, and you pick an alias. You use an alias for this site and use an alias for that site, and you don't have to do you're not constantly creating new accounts everywhere. You already have an identity. You create an alias, and you can use it. I think that will be a much better place.
So the world you're envisioning is we start to have browser extensions, and the browser extension is integrated with our own personal app in some sense. So we're browsing the internet, we're doing something, all of a sudden you get some alert. It says, hey, the site you're trying to go to is trying to do this. It looks kind of like password managers in that sense to me. For anybody who has experience using this, you're browsing around through the internet and you get to a point where it says, hey, you need to create an account here. Can you save the credentials to the password manager? Hey, you're visiting this site again. We have credentials. We're going to autofill it in. So we're going to log you in. Is that sort of the world that we're looking to? It's kind of like the feeling of a password manager, the feeling of an MFA device, the things that people are starting to have a lot of experience with in the world for achieving these types of computer security guarantees. Is that where you start to see Julia and notbot playing a role?
Yes, eventually. Obviously, you know, um, that is that is where we're looking to get. Obviously, that requires the individual sites that to choose to pick that up. So that's why we're starting with so the things that people can use themselves immediately wherever they want to.
Lucas, I think we've hit 40 minutes. It went fast. Honestly, it went faster than I
It
could have
did.
imagined.
It did go fast, but it was great. I think it's amazing. And I learned a lot. So I hope we get to talk more about it in the future. Ken, if you have time, love having you on. And otherwise, that's all the questions that I have.
I feel a deep dive on the tech is coming. So hopefully we can pin Ken and some of the rest of the tech team behind Julia and notbot to really dig into the details. I'm fascinated by the secure multi-party compute and some of the other aspects of what's going on here. We kind of scratched it at the barest top layer. So I feel that the listeners of this show really love the deep technical weeds. So we'll have to get to that one of these days. But I think we got over the broad brush strokes, as well as painting a little bit about what the future state looks like. Where's Julia going to be in a few months? What is tech that's on the roadmap, and what can you do today? I think it's important to really think about the tech that's already been released has utility. It isn't like we're waiting for future state. It's like, you can go out there and start doing stuff today. You can embed the stickers inside videos. You can present data to other users where you have peer-to-peer interactions, and sites are going to start integrating it where they find utility for maybe the Sybil protection stuff or the other things that that notbot gives a site for integrating.
Yes, exactly. I'm definitely looking forward to all the different things that we can do with this over time. And I'm really excited for what we're able to deliver now that people can use immediately.
All right. Well, that's all the time we've got, and we'll see you next time on FOMO.
Thank you much.